Hi parents, Miss Sakomani here. I know it's been a long time since I've done a video given everything that's been going on, but I'm going to do a few videos right now back to back. First of all, activities that we had done the last 2 weeks before the COVID outbreak, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about the plan for our online learning format. So I'm not going to put everything into one video. I'm just going to get right into the things that we did the 2 weeks prior to the outbreak, okay? So what we have been working on is we moved into an inquiry, like I had said previously, about Australia and the coral reefs. So a couple of the activities that we've been doing in our focus bins were around that. So unfortunately the kids didn't get to finish this one, but what one of their focus bins was creating their own coral reef. So what they were given a piece of cardboard, just a circular piece of cardboard, and they had to design and create their own coral reef. So they began by painting it with sponge paint, because we talked about different types of textures. They did it brown and white, so they all look quite different. A lot of them, these have been taken home already, so I just pulled a sample that I did have. Then they added sand. They each got to pick 2 seashells that they wanted, and then they started developing their seashells. Then they started developing their coral reefs. They put in soft corals, hard corals. So as you can see, the pom-poms represent the soft corals. Then we had harder corals like this. And then the kids were supposed to add 2 or 3 more layers, different rocks, another set of corals, but we obviously didn't get to that. Now the reason we're doing something like this is if you look over there, we talked about the 2 different types of corals, which were hard corals and soft corals. And the students, we looked closely at different images and we discussed what they look like, what they could feel like, the different colors involved. We talked about the different types of species that were on the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. So we had things like tube coral, table coral, I think elkhorn coral, don't quote me there, fan coral, tree coral, and toadstool coral. So we were just talking, I didn't really care whether the students memorize the coral names. It wasn't about that. It was just looking into different types of soft and hard corals and examples of them. And then we talked about, well, why would this be called table coral? Well, generally we name things based on people who founded it or what it would have looked like. So we discussed that. Then we did, I don't know if I talked to you about I did talk to you about a coral reef experiment. So that was the documentation here of it. So I won't even go into that. But that was the reasoning for doing that focus bin. So if you want to continue working on it at home, I can send out the link of what the final product was supposed to look like, and you're welcome to do it at home with your child. Then we did, we started talking about shapes. So we'd spent a lot of time looking at 2D and 3D shapes, and we did different activities around that. So this week with the kids, this is what I did with the students. I was leading this group that week, but they were given task cards and they had to create different 3D shapes. Now, we spent a lot of time first diving into 2D shapes and how many sides they have, vertices, and then we looked at 3D. And what I said to my students was that shapes are 2D shapes are flat and 3D shapes are built up. So what they had to do is they had to create 2 or 3 2D shapes and then show me how they could change them and make them 3D. So an example might be this would be a 2D square, and then they might change it into a 3D cube, and then they have to tell me, and then we talk about, okay, generally when 2D shapes change into 3D shapes, the name changes as well. So we talk about that, but the names are hard, like a triangular pyramid or a rectangular prism. They're harder for kindergartens to understand, so, and that's not in the curriculum, but I did teach them, and if they remembered it, great, and if they didn't, it wasn't a big deal to me. Then we looked at rhyming cards. So the kids had 30 rhyming cards that they had to match. So I wonder if I can pick one out here quickly. Okay, so cheer and deer. So they had to put the puzzle pieces together based on the images on the pieces and which ones rhymed. So obviously deer and bin don't rhyme, so that wouldn't have been a match. And the colors did help them. But the reason that I liked this rhyming puzzle game is, one, they had to work in a group. They had 5 to 6 kids in a group, and they had to work together and share and organize the pieces, lay them all out, and come up with a game plan. So I've talked to you about that idea of independence within group work and accountability. So how they could be their individuals in the group but work together because they have the common goal of completing the puzzle. So that I was looking for that. But the reason I also like this game is that a lot of times we talk about with the kids, what is a rhyme? Well, words that sound the same or sound alike. And I tell the kids, generally, there are some cases, but in most cases, words that sound the same have the same endings, which is what makes them sound the same. So in here, there was 3 that did not have the same endings, and they had to, at the end, push those puzzles aside and explain to me why they rhyme, or show me that they rhyme and that they knew they rhymed, but that they had the same ending. So for example, fly and pie, or whale and sail, right? Rhyming words, but different endings. Then we already took it down, my parents, but they each were given an ocean animal to cut and color, and then they'd have to tell me which zone of the ocean it fell in. So we had created that board around there, but it is gone. We wanted to disinfect and get rid of everything as quickly as we could to help stop the spread, obviously. So I'm sorry I don't have an example of that for you. Then we looked at, let's see. Oh, we did a roll and write again where we are working on numbers 1 to 10. I feel like in kindergarten we really need to stay consistent with that and make sure that we revisit it each month. I know it was the focus of my first 3 months in school, but kids tend to write numbers backwards, and and when it becomes habitual, it's hard to break. So we continue to practice that. So we did a roll and write game, and then they did mirrored. Sorry, I'm going to talk fast so I can get through all this. They did symmetry drawings. Was another one, so different types of symmetry drawings. You'd have to draw the other half, which works on tracking skills. And then we looked at robot designs. Now this was one of my favorite centers that week. What the children had to do was they had to create their own robot out of shapes. And it was just, they designed it. Whatever they wanted it to look at, they had to design their robot. And we talked about what the end product would be, and I'll explain it as I go. So for example, this was Dom, so he designed this robot, and then he had to tell me, okay, the hat was a triangle, the ears were triangles, the body was a rectangle, and so on and so forth. Or here was another robot designed by a kindergarten. Circles, trapezoid for the skirt, arches for the smile, diamond top, rectangle, squares, and I encourage students to use as many different shapes as they could think of, and I had examples of books that they could pull from. And then I actually had the physical shapes in front of them on each table so that they had an example in front of them, or what am I trying to say? A concrete example. So after they did this, then they had to take their robot and turn it into a 2D version of it out of paper. So they would cut the different shapes. So for example, I don't have one of the students because like I said, all their work has been sent home, but this was my example that I had out for them. So when I designed it on paper, it had a circle body, rectangle legs, etc. And then they cut them out of paper and had to create it. What we started to work towards, and again, we probably won't be able to finish this, but you're welcome at home to go ahead and do it, was after we did the design, the 2D, then we were going to use recyclable materials and turn it into a 3D robot. So we unfortunately can't do that, but that was the plan there, and then the kids could see the difference between the 2D and the 3D, and then it was moving through different steps. So this was a big project, and it was going to take a lot of time in class to build, but that was going to be part of our makerspace, so unfortunately we couldn't do that. Then we did secret sentences, and I've explained that before. So we did some secret sentences because I wanted to see where my students were at with their letter sounds and their sounding out, so it gave me a good assessment because we had demo coming up and we wanted to give you parents the most up-to-date description of where your child was at in terms of their reading, writing, sounding out. Then parents, what the students did was we had sea turtles hanging from the roof. We looked at sea turtles more in depth and their life cycles as we talked about, and then we looked at some of the different types of sea turtles. So like Ridley, the loggerhead, the green sea turtle, the leatherback, and the hawksbill. We just kind of more so compared them, sizes, different areas where they lived, what they looked like, but we didn't dive too much into each particular species because we are ran out of time, but what the students did was, how much time do I have on this?
You've got like, it's 10 minutes.
Okay. What the students did was they had to do, we created our own sea turtles out of paper plates, and then they had the kids actually pre-cut the turtle. It was another multi-step project with me. But what I had the students decide which sea turtle did I want to use to help color my shell. So the students picked one. This student did the leatherback. So they had to look very closely at these pictures, describe in detail to me what they saw, and then try to replicate it on their turtle. So it was all about looking closely, finding the detail, being able to represent what was in the picture on their own model. And now I wanted the students to be very independent with them. So what I did was I set up all the paints on their water table. I had a plate and I said, okay, go pick your image. They would choose the one they wanted, and I said, I want you to look closely and decide which paint colors you need. So it was up to them to come up, pick their exact paint colors, get their paintbrushes, go back to their stations, and we did this in small groups obviously, and then recreate the sea turtle from the picture. I wanted it to be theirs and I wanted it to be independent. So it was really great to see what the kids were able to come up with. And you could see the white spots on this sea turtle's shell. So great job. They did a great job. It was beautiful as they hung from the roof. Then, so that was that. Then we started guided reading. Parents, guided reading is when the students work with me once a week, and we look at books and we read them together, and then there's a writing activity that corresponds with them. We're looking at the orange kit, which is a beginning level kit, and it has a lot of sight words in it, and they're all simple sentences. As the books go on through the kit, then the sentences become a little bit more complex. So we are working on guided reading and reading together. So we did 2 books so far. We did Frog, Food, and Rex. And then what the students had to do is, after reading them with me, they were given a writing activity. For example, the writing activity to go with Frog Food was they had to tell me what they liked bugs on. That's what the book was about. So I like bugs on hot dogs, and I like bugs on ice cream. And this was phonetically sounded out by this student. And now, the whole idea was leaving proper finger spaces, writing a complete sentence, and here I would have had this child end it with a period. And I obviously forgot to look at that because I want them to start to build simple sentences on their own. Some students were able to sound it out on their own, which was great, and others needed help. As I've told you before, every child's on their unique learning path, and kindergarten is very varied on their levels, right? Parents, what I have sent home is everything from shoes to their scrapbook with everything that they have in it, with everything that they've done so far this year. So that is all been put in up to date and sent home, and thank you to my wonderful EAs for all their support in that. We sent home writing journals, we sent home their printing books, because these are all the things that you guys will use in the next few months to help keep up with your child's learning. Oh, and then we also did, sorry, before I forgot, we also started to introduce robots to the students. So the students started to play with Kibo robots. Am I at 15 minutes?
13.
Okay, so this robot, I'm going to talk really fast because then my video is going to cut out. This is called the Kibo robot, and this is the robot that I first begin to introduce to students in kindergarten, and then they start to code. It helps them with coding. So what they had to do was the kindergartens were introduced to this robot, and they have to build the robot. It's quite simple. And that would be the builder's job. Okay. Then we have the next job, and they were working in a small group, was a coder. Now using these blocks, and there's tons of these blocks, I just separated the most important ones that I wanted the kids to begin with. They had to create their own code. And what a code is it's pretty much telling the robot what to do. So we practiced that in class before we even moved to the robots. But what you have to do is you have to start with begin, and then you tell the robot what to do. Okay, I want it to move forward, I want it to spin around, and then I want it to...
20 seconds left.
And then I want it to stop, 20 seconds, okay. And then I want it to stop. Then the next job was the coder, or the scanner. So the scanner takes the robot, scans these barcodes, and then the checker makes sure everything's as it needs to be. And then, am I over? 15? And then the robot will move accordingly.
No, you are.
Okay.